My name is Jeff Roberts, and I'll be your host for this edition of Time for a Slow Burn. This program is a monthly event, and we will discuss topics of interest to the southeastern corner of Wisconsin, the state, and of course, nationally. Topics can be just about anything. Usually something that starts off as a discussion, a debate, or just a plain old-fashioned yelling match between friends and neighbors. Surprising what can get a person all riled up. Sadly, it's usually something about local or national politics, a television program, or something we've witnessed firsthand. And sometimes it's just a rumor. For our first topic, I felt it important not to just research written articles in journals and search the internet for content, but to get out the calculator and start calculating some of the data that I'd already found. This topic, as you can imagine, is about taxes. One of my favorite topics, and one I am certain it's one of yours as well. In America, there are a few absolutes, other than death and taxes, that is. So let's dive right in and take a closer look at taxes. In the United States, we have 50 states and several territories. Each handles taxes in a variety of ways and spends the money collected in the form of taxes in just as many ways, if not more. Hence, deficit spending, and seldom do we hear about a tax surplus, unless the state legislature is getting ready to spend more money on some pork program that the legislators have cooked up. Taxes are raised through a variety of methods. Some are sales tax imposed on all purchases, with a few exceptions like basic subsistence and a few other categories. Sales tax includes, but not limited to, gas, tires, automobile parts, clothing, lawn care, building materials, new and used car purchases, just to name a few. The list is massive. But one of the most important things that most Americans ignore is this. We pay federal, state, county, city, plus government-sponsored programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And the list has additions all of the time, and it's becoming equally impactful. So much so, many business think tanks and consumer advocate groups are chiming in just to show just how much we're paying in taxes, and which states pay the least and which pay the most. So what does all that mean? Well, to be honest, if you're paying your taxes and think you're paying too much, you might be right. If you're among those who pay little or no taxes each year, get money back somehow that is beyond what you paid in, then there's cause for alarm for everyone else. Did you know, according to the USA Today article in March 21st of 2015, authored by Della Costa, Chloe Della Costa, the average American taxpayer paid a total of $17,000 in federal taxes this year, or each year. That is $17,000 per taxpayer, not per person in America. In all 50 states and territories, there are some sort of taxes raised in the form of sales tax, income tax, a combination of both, or some other type of tax. The least amount of sales tax paid is Alaska. The person there averages $2,993 per taxpayer. The most amount of taxpayer money paid in is from Illinois. Go figure. With an average of $7,919 per year. Here in the land of cheese and brats and the Packers, we're third on the list, with an average of $7,159. Only Nebraska and Illinois pay more than we do. Boys and girls, that's frightening, especially when you consider there are so many who do not pay taxes at all, and they're proud of the fact someone else is paying, and they don't have to. Does that really seem fair to you? I ask because our president, the current seated president, asked that same question during the first campaign for his presidency, and several other rhetorical questions aimed at inciting the poor to rise up and vote Democratic come general election time, and we're facing that again. He used that same sort of BS line the second time around when Mitt Romney was his opponent and the Senate Majority Leader lied to America, stating that Governor Romney hadn't paid taxes in years. What a BS story he gave. Senator Reid lied to America so that his party's candidate could get the upper hand come Election Day. And then, when he was called out on it for lying, he simply stated, he, meaning Mitt Romney, isn't in the White House, is he? Now, over the course of the Obama administration, we've heard that nonsense spewed repeatedly, and Obama never seems to tire of saying it. Sadly, that just proves he isn't the smartest guy in the room and is falling for the same old tired cliches that his supporters did so many years ago when he was first elected. Remember, it was Obama that claimed everybody needs to pay their fair share. Really? Just exactly what is our fair share, and what are we supposed to pay? Obama never clarified what that fair share is. Harry Reid has never clarified what that fair share is, nor has the IRS, the most powerful government agency in America, that has never clarified what our fair share really is. But the socialist dogma of wealth distribution has been boiling under the surface of America's conscience for almost a decade now. It was brought back to the forefront into prominence once again by the first Obama campaign for president. The simplistic lies and myths spewed and spread by the Obama administration and his minions during that campaign of hope and change really set the stage for America to undergo violent demonstrations against Wall Street and the financial world as a whole. Now, don't get me wrong. Wall Street and the banking system have really received far too many bailouts, totaling to the tune of billions, with no strings attached. Greedy CEOs took the money and ran to the nearest offshore bank and happily made their deposits, then scoffed at taxpayers when questioned about their motives for giving huge pay raises and bonuses to many of their underlings, many of whom are the reason the companies are in dire straits to begin with. Very costly and piss-poor financial mistakes and miscues caused the near ruin of the investment system as we know it in America. So let's set the Wayback Machine to a time right after Obama was elected, and the first time we witnessed marches across Wall Street and against Wall Street, usually by massive groups of idiots who didn't have a clue how the financial system worked anyway. They just knew what the president told them during his campaign. Wall Street was bad and needs fixing. One of the saddest cases of groupthink if I ever saw one. Excuse me. So the question becomes, after all, how many millions do you need to make anyway? That was a quote from our president. I really wonder, how many do you need to make, Mr. President? Or should I be asking, how many will you make since becoming the president? Or is that no longer important? Then there's the aftermath of being the president when you get to get on the speaking circuit like the Clintons, and chances are you and your wife will continue to make millions. Yes, you too can charge over $250,000 to speak at major universities and claim to give the money away to charities. But like the Clintons, in reality, you give the money to your own named charity, which your family can run and gets all the perks. Important things, like flying in the corporate jet, huge expense accounts, free legal counsel, and the list goes on and on. Remember, in the case of the Clintons, you have to have free legal counsel. He was disbarred. Then along comes some conservative or a member of the media and questions why this is allowed to happen. Then we're getting bombarded with that nonsense about how broke you were when you left the White House and how you can't pay your bills, just like the Clintons. All to impress the voters. Alarm bells should be going off throughout the media, but the media has turned off the sound. Well, at least ABC, CBS, and NBC have. Fox is still trying to keep everyone's attention on the facts. Unfortunately, this whole mess is falling on deaf ears now. But that leads us up to the next point in the discussion about wealth distribution, and taxes. Who is really paying their fair share? And what is fair share anyway? How in the world can that be defined? Well, it took a professor of economics from UCLA by the name of Lee Onahan to explain it. And he does it quite well for a piece he did for Prager University. For those who don't know, Prager University is a free, non-degree granting university that provides education services for anyone willing to join and receive their free newsletter. You can find out more information about Prager University at www.prageru.com. I encourage anyone to at least check out the variety of subjects and professors that are with Prager University. You'll be surprised when you visit one online, and I would say it's well worth your time. Here's what Professor Onahan had to say about do the rich pay their fair share? Please watch this carefully so that you can make an informed decision, not just follow a herd of braying jackasses.
Here's a question you're likely to hear whenever the subject of taxes comes up. Do the rich pay their fair share? There are two parts to this question. who is rich and what is fair. Let's start with who is rich. Nearly everyone assumes that a person who is among the top 10% of all income earners qualifies as rich. But according to 2011 data, a top 10% household makes around $150,000 or above in gross annual income. That's income before deductions and taxes. Now, $150,000 is a nice living, but it certainly doesn't make you rich. Okay then, what about the top 5%? You get into this percentile if your household makes around $190,000 or above. That's a nice bump, but it hardly puts you in the rich category. How about the top 1%? That's $500,000 or above. A great income, but remember, most people only get to that level after many years of hard work and quite possibly the accumulation of serious debt to fund their education or build their business. Of course, there are people who make more than $500,000, and there are some who make many millions, even billions, but the number who do is very small. Now let's talk about fair. Fair would seem to be that the group of taxpayers who earn 10% of the country's income would pay 10% of the country's taxes. The group who earned 20% would pay 20% of the taxes, and so on. But what if I told you that according to IRS data, the top 10% of all earners, the people making $150,000 and above, pay 71% of all federal income tax while earning only 43% of all income. If anything, the top 10% pay more than their fair share. So, as it happens, do the much reviled top 1%. They earn 17% of all income, but pay 37% of all federal income taxes. And what about those at the other end of the income scale, the lower earners? Are we squeezing them? Hardly. Those who make $45,000 or less, 47% of all earners, pay little and often no income taxes. But what about payroll taxes, the money we pay to fund Social Security and Medicare? That takes a bigger bite of the paycheck of lower earners than higher earners. Isn't that unfair? Consider 2 points. First, it's misleading to call the payroll tax a tax. It's really an insurance payment that guarantees we receive Social Security and Medicare after we turn 65. Second, the benefits we receive from Social Security are capped, no matter how much we have paid in. This means that the payroll taxes of high earners actually help subsidize the Social Security and Medicare benefits that low earners receive at retirement. How do all these numbers stack up against other countries? The U.S. income tax system is substantially more progressive, meaning that income tax rates rise as income rises, than other advanced countries, including Germany and Sweden. So if you think that our tax system is unfair because it coddles high earners, then you must conclude that tax systems in these other countries are even more unfair. So how high are tax rates on Americans today? Well, throw in federal tax increases mandated in 2013 and state taxes, and top earners face a tax rate of more than 50% in California and New York. Other states like Maryland and Connecticut are not far behind. Do you think a tax rate of greater than 50% is fair? If so, is there any rate that wouldn't be? Nobody's calling for bake sales for anyone in the top 10% of earners, and no one wants to minimize the struggles of those at the lower income strata. But to say the rich, however you might define them, don't pay their fair share is simply wrong. Finally, numerous academic studies, including ones that I have done, show that when tax rates are too high, investment, risk-taking by entrepreneurs, and therefore job creation all decline. And when that happens, it's the poor who suffer, not the rich. The rich do fine. It may feel good to take even more money from the top 10%, but it doesn't do good, and it sure isn't fair. I'm Lee Ohanian, professor of economics at UCLA for Prager University.
Welcome back. Remember to visit Prager University at www.prageru.com and check out their variety of subject matter and lessons, all for free. Darn good deal if you ask me. Well, for our next topic, I had to reach pretty far into the grab bag. Yeah, not really. This one was sitting on the top of the surface, ready to go. Here's why I say that. 2 years ago, I did a series on the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Our discussions took us to Carthage College here in Kenosha, and we sat down with two professors, one of constitutional law and the other a history professor. Both professors gave their insights into the state of mind of the patriots at the time who contributed to the documents that helped shape America. Well, recently, the national conscience has been absorbed with the new discussion on liberty, our constitutional guaranteed freedoms, and many other issues. And what do we really mean when we say, why have they come under attack? And I turned to Robert George, a professor of jurisprudence at Princeton University, for his explanation in a lecture for Prager University on that very same title. Why are we losing liberty? Once again, I encourage you to go to Prager University, to their website, and check out the lectures. The courses are free, short, and to the point. Exactly what today's adult needs to make an informed decision. Here's Professor George to clarify.
How did the framers of the Constitution of the United States seek to preserve liberty and prevent tyranny? Pretty basic question. Here's the answer I usually get from my students. Well, Professor, to protect the individual and minorities against the tyranny of the majority, they added the Bill of Rights, and they gave the power to enforce those rights to the Supreme Court. Are my students correct? The editorial boards of the New York Times or the Washington Post and many members of the U.S. Congress would say yes. Unfortunately, the answer is wrong. I say unfortunately because it reflects a common misunderstanding of the Constitution. And that misunderstanding has led to a serious erosion of our freedom. Let me explain. Both the Bill of Rights and judicial review, the idea that the courts can decide if a law is constitutional or not, were hotly debated items when the Constitution was being drafted in 1789. The Federalists, the group led by Alexander Hamilton that wanted a national constitution, opposed including a Bill of Rights. They feared it would actually undermine what the Federalists regarded as the main protections against tyranny in the document, the limited nature of the national government itself. The Constitution did not envision a national government of general jurisdiction, meaning a government that could do whatever it wanted, but rather a government of enumerated and delegated powers, a government that had authority over only specific areas of American life. All other powers were to be beyond the scope of the national government and reserved to the states or to the American people themselves. That's why when political necessity forced the Federalists to yield to demands for a Bill of Rights, they took care to add two important amendments, the 9th and 10th. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. These amendments reinforce the idea that the national government couldn't just assume powers it had not been specifically granted by the Constitution. Unfortunately, these amendments have not stymied the expansion of the national authority. The power grab the Federalists feared, the national government taking more and more control over more and more areas of American life, took place. Not immediately, but over time, and especially beginning in the second half of the 20th century. That same time frame has seen a similar concentration of power in the judiciary, especially in the Supreme Court, so that now most Americans think of the Supreme Court as the ultimate arbiter of almost every social and political dispute. The founders never envisioned the court in this role. How has the court fared in playing it? Well, there have been moments of glory, to be sure, such as in the racial desegregation case of Brown against the Board of Education in the 1950s. But it has also handed down decision after decision, from Dred Scott against Sanford in the 1850s, which facilitated the expansion of slavery, to Roe against Wade in the 1970s, which legalized abortion throughout the United States, in which the justices have plainly overstepped the bounds of their authority by creating law from the bench, thereby further expanding their own power and that of the national government. Moreover, the Supreme Court has done little to stop the executive and legislative branches of the national government from unconstitutionally overreaching. Recently, the court found a way, by a bare majority, to uphold an obvious case of constitutional overreach by the national government, the imposition of a law, or individual mandate as it is known, requiring every citizen to purchase health insurance coverage as part of President Obama's signature Affordable Care Act. The government defended this mandate as a legitimate exercise of its expressly delegated power to regulate commerce among the states. The trouble is that the mandate does not regulate commerce at all. Rather, it forces people into commerce on pain of a financial penalty. But why did the issue get to the courts at all? Congress and the President should have recognized and honored the fact that the Constitution simply does not empower the national government to impose a mandate on the people to purchase products, whether health insurance or anything else. We've drifted a long way from the original vision of the founders. The further we've drifted, the more powerful the national government has grown, and the less free Americans have become. Freedom can be taken away, but it can also be given away out of sheer ignorance. If we Americans, we the people, want to get some of that freedom back, we need to read America's founding documents. All the freedom we ever wanted is there. I'm Robert George, professor of jurisprudence at Princeton University, for Prager University.
Welcome back. Now I know what you're thinking. Giving away our freedoms and liberty? No way. Our government is elected by the people to do good things for the people, right? Well, yes and no. Let me explain. We have elected men and women to our Congress, state legislatures, and many elected office over the past 238 years. Sadly, not all have done good for America, for Americans. Some have done more harm than good, and a few have done nothing at all. They started out with the best of intentions, but did little, if anything, while serving out their terms. Then there are a few that have become a very strong voice and take charge over those who are no longer willing or able to do their part as elected officials. We're a nation of debtors. However, when a few in Congress decide to take charge of an issue, they are very persuasive, to the point of being downright tactless in order to get their way. The same thing holds true in the state legislatures. If one legislator becomes the mouthpiece for the masses, with no opposition from the other party, well, there you have it, a recipe for disaster. Another example of groupthink. Right or wrong, doesn't matter as long as the mouthpiece gets their way. Let's explore that a bit more, shall we? A bill gets introduced into committees, into the House or the Senate. It plows through, goes for a vote on the floor. Many pork projects and spending bills are done this way, when Congress has recessed or is on the campaign trail. It helps to push through bills with little or no debate and no worry about backlash later on. Then there's the back door to everything. Then, of course, there are the presidential edicts. But the power of the presidential pen, or by the power of the presidential pen, an executive order suddenly becomes important and is defended by the ruling party as law. These executive orders are no such thing. Presidents have used executive orders to get things done when Congress dug in their collective feet, especially during an election year. If the president wanted a bill or bills to be presented to Congress and was told by Congress, no, then the pen comes out. This is done to circumvent the legislative branch of government in favor of the executive branch. Sometimes this works, sometimes not. Our Congress may be under a mandate by the people to not allow any bills like that to go through due to the nature of the bill or the long-term impact of such bills on those whom the legislators represent back home. In any case, the executive branch does not have the authority to do an end around and leave Congress out in the process. The use of executive orders, called presidential memorandum by Mr. Obama himself, is still an executive order and not enforceable by law. Any executive order by any other name is still an executive order. There are some in the Obama administration that clearly do not want the public to find out about them, including the president himself. Maybe that's why he is so afraid of involving the public in producing his executive orders and presidential memorandums. He is frightened to death the public will not support them. Keep in mind, the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights clarify what rights and privileges we enjoy as Americans. They also clarify what is possible by each of the three branches of our government. One branch cannot take advantage of the other and do what it wants when it wants. Hence the check and balance system of government. We have it and we enjoy it when we use it. We need this check and balance system to help guide us in our quest as a nation. America has enjoyed 238 years of existence, and this very existence is threatened by those who would see America fall, her economy torn apart, and those who depend on America to survive the tyranny. The dictatorships located all over the world would stand up and cheer. Who would speak for those in need? Who of the criminals located in the United Nations building would dare try and help others in need? And I dare say, no one, not one. The entire Security Council is too busy trying to placate Russia and China as they attempt to take over countries nearby and seize territories from their neighbors. This they do in the name of some ancient empire that hasn't existed for decades, or in China's case, centuries. If these two giant thugs start rolling over borders to reestablish an old and crumbling empire, who will dare stand up to them? What will the mighty UN do? They will do as they've always done. Look for someone else to step up, take the reins, and do the dirty work for as long as possible. And then they will suddenly, when the threat has been taken care of, a mighty roar of injustice will be heard all throughout the halls of the Security Council. The UN will once again emerge to the forefront and cry, foul. The lead country has gone too far, done something they shouldn't have done, and now everyone wants a trial for the leaders. Didn't we just go through that mess? War criminals, one and all. Well, here's where the mouthpieces and where the atrocities were being committed all come to light, by the dictatorship and usually by its own people, in far-off places like Cambodia. Remember back in the 1970s, and that crown fool Pol Pot, the butcher of thousands of educators and Christians? He sat on a throne of skulls to show off his power. Or what about Iraq? Remember Saddam Hussein and the poisonous gassing of the Kurds? He killed thousands to prove he was all-powerful, and no one stood up to him until the U.S.-led coalition. Remember Nazi Germany and the attempt to exterminate all of the Jewish people? Millions died before and during World War II, just to prove the Nazis were a master race? We have so many more examples to draw from, and the UN has stood by and let it happen since its inception in the 1940s. Oh, they threatened to impose economic sanctions on the host countries, but nothing of importance or of any magnitude. Ooh, big deal. I'm sure the dictators of the world tremble in fear at the thought of economic sanctions. And we were gullible enough to allow the UN to be placed on our soil, especially when our own Senate refused to allow the League of Nations to be planted here in the turn of the 20th century. Guess old dogs do learn new tricks, don't they? Maybe we should create an obedience school for politicians and make them go to it before they assume the office they were elected to assume. Teach things like how to read the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and what do they really mean? What's the difference between judicial, executive, and legislative powers, and why they must remain separate? These simple things have been forgotten by our congressional leaders as they step off the plane into the mainstream of Washington, D.C. They just chomp at the bit to rape and pillage the American economy at will, and sadly, no longer lift a finger to stop them. No one does. Those elected to political office have forgotten who sent them to Washington and why we share a measure of blame for that. We no longer hold them accountable for their actions. Maybe it's time to clean out the halls of Congress and start over. A new bill should be introduced to establish term limits and abolish the horrific wasting of taxpayer dollars on congressional retirements and separate health care plans for Congress and the President. Time to level the playing field. Didn't Obama say that? Anyway, that way it'll make everybody share the cost of health care in America, just to be fair. Well, that's it for another edition of Time for a Slow Burn. Tune in next time for topics of interest that tend to burn your hide. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.